episode of the Tango Banter. You might hear a little bit of purring going on right now because my cat Loki decided to join me for this recording. I am just back from the San Diego Tango Marathon, and it was another fantastic weekend of dancing and connecting with a lot of old friends and meeting some new fans. Some of you sought me out and connected with me, telling me that you're listening to the podcast, and I appreciate that. It's always fun to connect with some of those people who have been with me over the last few months, and I appreciate the stories and the sentiment. Keep it coming. I love hearing from all of you. You can always reach out to me at I Am So Tango on any social media. So I am heading to Portland, Oregon next week. I will be there the first weekend of September 2nd through the 4th, doing the second phase, the second installment of my immersion weekend for women who want to learn to lead. So if you are in the area in Portland and you'd like to join, it's a 3-day immersive experience where we're going to dive into some musicality concepts and explore how you can start developing your own leading style, which I think is one of the best and most exciting aspects of working on leading, is that you can really dive into that creative part of yourself. So if you have any questions, of course, reach out to me. All right, so I thought today would be a good opportunity for me to talk about this idea of how to tell whether someone is a good dancer. It's a pretty common topic that comes up at the milonga or practica. Usually it happens in the form of somebody coming up to someone else and saying, hey, who are the good dancers here? Or they might be looking at somebody in particular and saying, hey, is that person good? Is that a good dancer? And we can debate whether that's ethical and whether it's rude or not to do that. But, 4 songs or 3 songs with a person is somewhat of a long-term commitment. And people want to know ahead of time. It's good to know what it is that you're looking at when you're thinking about whether somebody's a good dancer or not. So I thought this might be useful for you, both in terms of knowing what to look out for. So I'll share some things that I consider when I'm looking at the dance floor, and I typically spend maybe the first 1 or 2 tandas when I get to a milonga just watching, especially if it's a new milonga to me. I spend a lot of time watching, looking for certain qualities that I consider to be important for me when I'm choosing to dance with somebody. So that's one aspect that's really useful. The other one, you might be someone who's thinking, well, I want to be dancing with higher level dancers. So what are those dancers looking for? What are the things that I can focus on to attract higher level dancers? And I'm particularly thinking, there are people who want to dance with me, for example. And if perhaps you're one of those people, what is it that I'm looking for that you can incorporate into your thinking to attract someone like me, who is, I consider myself maybe not advanced, but seasoned enough, and I both lead and follow equally. Recently, it's been more leading, actually. This marathon that I was at, I think I led more than I followed. And I'm pretty specific, I'm pretty particular, so I'll let you in on some of my secrets that I have that in my mind. And then also, I want to invite those of you who have your own things you think about that you want to share, perhaps add to this discussion, then send them to me. Send me some of your ideas, like what are the things that you're looking at that are important to you when you're observing dancers. Okay, so hopefully we'll have a good outcome to this episode that will stimulate some good conversation. Okay, so the number one thing I will share with you, that the very first thing that I look at when I come to a milonga and I just kind of look out onto the floor and observe, the first thing that I look at in dancers is posture. Now, posture has a few elements to it, and the ones that I really look for are what I consider to be part of the essential alignment pieces that I really spend a lot of time studying myself and work with people a lot on. So, number one, the position of the head. That's like one of the top ones, especially for leaders. So if I look at leaders, I look at the position of the head. If the head is too forward, that automatically kind of gives me that feeling that I don't want to necessarily dance with that person, because the head forward is quite difficult to deal with as a follower in close embrace. So that's the first thing, the alignment of the head. The second is actually the alignment of the chest and the ribs. This is a little bit more of a subtle observation that you might not necessarily have a visual in your mind as you listen to me. But there's a tendency for some dancers to develop a habit of keeping their ribs very forward. This is particularly common in followers, and I think it's possibly because of the way they were instructed in the beginning. It's also possible that it's just the way we've been taught about posture in general as women. We have a little bit of a kind of an exaggerated vertical posture that we think is healthy, which requires you to kind of reach your chest up and suck in your belly, and because we're looking for that hourglass shape or whatever. So the chest forward creates an instability, and the heels, of course, contribute to that as well. So if I see somebody dancing with their chest quite forward, I automatically know that it's going to be difficult to lead them, for example, that they're going to be a little bit vulnerable in terms of their axis. They might lean on me and things like that. It also can be an issue with leaders as well, because anytime that your ribs are aligned a little too forward, it automatically pushes your axis to the front. And so if I'm dancing with a leader whose chest is quite forward, I feel that they're not as stable as I would like them to be. So I feel I have to take on some of the work of keeping their balance and compensate, which is fine. If I'm dancing with somebody like that, that's part of good mechanics, like learning to adapt and becoming a dancer who can adapt to all of those things. So I'm not judging that necessarily. I'm just pointing out that that's what I look for when I'm observing dancers on the dance floor. I'm kind of keeping track of these little details. The third big piece, and that's probably going to be the most obvious one, and that's the pelvis. Where are the hips? Where is the pelvis in relation to the rest of the body? It's very common for beginners, both leaders and followers, to have the pelvis a little too forward, okay? So it kind of looks like the tail is slightly tucked, and it also kind of makes the knees a little softer, because you're kind of having to shift back a little bit. And I apologize, I'm lacking the words to describe this in a way that makes total sense to you if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about. But there is definitely a tendency among beginner level dancers to have their pelvis a little too forward, which makes it very difficult to dance with. Okay, so within the posture, those are the number 1, 2, and 3 things that I keep track of and really look at when I'm assessing the dance floor. Now, the second piece that I'm looking at is the actual movement mechanics. So the posture might be good, but then I'm looking at how is the person moving. Are they balanced? Do they look like they're in control of their movement? Sometimes dancers become very ambitious, a little too ambitious for their own good. So I'm kind of looking at the quality of movement, and I know myself, I know what kind of movement I like. So I tend to stray away from dancers who move a lot on the dance floor. And there's some exceptions because I don't know why this is, but you know how they say you're not supposed to dance in the middle of the floor? But there are a handful of dancers who are really good that I love dancing with, who love dancing in the middle of the floor. So sometimes it's kind of funny because even though I'll say that I typically don't like when somebody has a lot of movement around the dance floor and kind of cutting lanes or being disrespectful of the line of dance, at the same time, sometimes I end up really enjoying it. So, but that's another thing that I consider. The other movement mechanics that might be useful and that I really look at is the mechanics within the body itself and between the partners. So here's where I'm looking at things like dissociation, or I prefer using spiraling. Are the movements able to spiral easily? Because tango is kind of built on the idea of spirals. We're spiraling around the center of the room, we're spiraling around each other, we're spiraling inside our own body. So I'm looking for, is the body moving easily into those spirals? Is the person arriving on their axis in a way that keeps their body stable and at ease? Tension, looking for tension. Sometimes you see a person is so tense that they're kind of shaking, or they're obviously kind of having to grip their frame to keep balance. So sometimes I notice that happens with women who are maybe not as familiar with dancing in heels, or have a difficult time dancing in heels, so they have to compensate by creating more tension in the embrace because you lose balance. So those kinds of things definitely stand out to me, and I prefer not to dance with somebody like that. Although, again, you know, whenever I am in a situation where I decide to dance with someone like that, that's where my own body mechanics and my own knowledge really pays off, so that I can make it enjoyable for both of us and not hurt myself. So that's going to be our movement mechanics. There's other things that fall under the category, and I'm sure that maybe some of you have your own things that you kind of look at. I want to say that frequently I've heard people say that if they're looking at, if let's say it's women followers looking at, you know, who's a good leader, one good way of telling who a good leader is by seeing the woman's face, the woman that this person's dancing with. And if there's a smile, then that's a good indicator that the leader is good. So that sometimes works. Sometimes it doesn't. You can, let me know if you've tried that before. Okay, so let's move on. Now we're getting to a little bit nitty gritty, and this will be a little bit more abstract. And I hope one day I can show you this in person and I can reveal to you in a more tactile way what I'm talking about. But now we're going to talk a little bit about the embrace technique, particularly this concept of quality of embrace. Now, the reason why this is abstract is because we typically think about embrace as something we have to feel in order to know whether it is good or not. But with time, there are certain things that I've learned to pinpoint that let me know the quality of the embrace ahead of time. And so there's a few things that I kind of watch out for. One is too much movement inside the embrace, and meaning that the shape of the embrace changes a lot of arm movement, a lot of extension and flexion of the elbows, which means the distance between the partners changes a lot. This is a sort of it can be a nuevo style of dancing. Definitely, that technique is there. But a lot of times I've noticed that what I'm really referring to, that happens more with, again, less experienced dancers who might not understand what the embrace is supposed to do and how it's supposed to function. So if there's a lot of movement in the embrace, to me, that's usually kind of a red flag. But also, I kind of look for the opposite as well, because sometimes I notice there are more traditional, older, more experienced, and more milonguero style dancers who take on a very rigid embrace, something that kind of doesn't really budge and doesn't change shape at all. And I kind of, I'm careful with that, because sometimes it can feel really great, and other times, it can be really restrictive and it feels like you can't get out, In those cases, when I see the embrace is very small, I typically look at the shape of the hands, for example, the open embrace hand, and also the level of tension in the closed embraced arm. So sometimes you can tell that there's a little bit too much tension. And that, to me, is kind of like, I watch out for that, because I prefer not to dance with something like that. And, it kind of reminds me, too, this quality, if you've ever observed the dance floor, and sometimes you look at a couple and you see the follower sort of falling into their next step and kind of rushing, and you get this feeling like they're not quite able to keep up with the music. They're kind of running after the leader. So that quality a lot of times comes from the quality of the embrace. So a lot of times the embrace will be so rigid, and the pace of the leader will be a little bit too fast. And so that combination will create a quality in the follower where they're kind of falling forward a little bit. Now, sometimes the followers fall forward because of their own mechanics. And again, there is a way to tell which one's which. And as I'm talking about this, I'm realizing I have all these little categories, and I've been geeking out on this for so long that I have a lot of different ways I assess this. So these are the things that I'm kind of considering when I'm looking at the dance floor. Now, when it comes to embrace quality for followers, this one's a really interesting case, because quality of the embrace is really tricky, because every single dancer believes that quality of the embrace is paramount, and everyone will say that they are working on their embrace, and that their embrace is the most important thing, and that's what they work on the most. And and musicality is up there too. Like everybody will agree that it's important. And it's especially pronounced among women followers, that the embrace is something that they really feel they're doing correctly, but it's actually not correct. And I understand, like, by saying correct and incorrect, I'm kind of opening a door into some conflict here, or perhaps argument, and that's not my intention. I have just been so aware of this recently, of it's kind of a dilemma, because there are a lot of women who are very frustrated that they're not getting the dances that they want, and they want to know what they can do differently. And 99% of the time, the solution is in the embrace. But they are not really getting that feedback, because partially, you can't really give that feedback in a milonga. Secondly, a lot of times they just are being instructed by someone who doesn't understand the follower side of the embrace themselves. Like, a lot of times it's that miscommunication. But the embrace for followers, I've noticed you frequently can see a rigidity on the dance floor, kind of like a sort of a stiffness, and a bit of like too much resistance in the embrace. And that's a really common one I see. And I know where it comes from. It comes from this idea that you're supposed to keep the shape of the embrace, and it's understandable that that's what would happen. But I have to say, it makes it very difficult to lead. And I've, this is the first time I'm kind of openly talking about it in this way. And, I hope that you don't get offended out there, because, how do we know? How do we know that this is happening? So if you're listening and you're thinking to yourself, like, you're one of those people who has been frustrated about, why is it that particular dancer who is advanced, who dances with my best friend, or who dances with that person or that person, why are they not dancing with me? I have just as much experience. I've done just as much dancing. I've traveled to Buenos Aires. If you're kind of in that position, I don't know for sure, but I can tell you that very likely it is the embrace quality. So either the embrace is too rigid, which I think happens more, or the embrace is too passive and too light. So that's the other extreme. That's also quite common, especially at the beginner level, because somehow, I know I was taught this, and I think it's still somewhat of a problem, that followers, women in particular, are taught to be very light. They're taught to be, or somehow they interpret that. Maybe they're not taught that, but maybe we just kind of have this mindset of like, I'll just do it for you. You don't even have to tell me. Just think it, and I'm going to do it for you. Like, we want to anticipate the leader's need. We want to move as lightly as possible. And I frequently say that's like dancing with the feather. It's so frustrating. And there's literally nothing I can do as a leader to promote or to create something different in that moment. And it becomes really frustrating, right? So, so both leaders and followers have these little, challenging moments where you really have to seek out somebody's honest feedback about your embrace, and it's a, kind of a tricky, maybe even uncomfortable idea to really seek out that feedback, because it brings up some feelings. Because if you've been dancing for a long time, maybe you think you're you're supposed to be good already. You already know this, But that would be my suggestion. That would be my advice, is to seek out advice from someone who dances both roles equally. Like, that's really been one of the biggest insights for me, is that if you're a follower and you're taking lessons with somebody who is a leader, and when I say a leader, I mean they lead primarily on the dance floor socially. So somebody, they might know how to follow, they might follow in a lesson, they know the figures, but they primarily 99.9% of the time at the milonga, they lead. So if you take lessons as a follower from someone like that, your feedback that you're going to get is going to be really structured by that person's understanding of the dance as a leader. So it might not be as useful or as understandable to you as when you dance with somebody who knows your role from inside out, right? Who understands how to do it. So just a little tidbit. I think I'm going to do another episode just on like my advice on what teachers to choose for you. I think it's really worthwhile because there are so many teachers out there, and there are so many specialties, so many ways you can progress in your tango, and I think it's worthwhile to talk about that. I diverted just a little bit here, but I'm going to close the idea of the embrace quality with hand tension. That's a big one. I really look for that. I really don't like a lot of hand tension, and especially in the open side of the embrace, if I see that the hand is sort of an unnatural shape or it's squeezing really hard, I kind of look out for that. Now, the last two I'm going to talk about relate to each other because they're kind of intertwined, and that is movement patterns and musicality. So what do I mean by movement patterns? I mean by vocabulary, like what kind of vocabulary are they doing? And is it to the music? So that one, I think, is a little bit harder to spot when you're first starting out because you don't know what to look for. But one thing that you can ask yourself, and I do that, is can I tell the difference? Can I tell which orchestra they're dancing to, basically? Like, can I tell the difference when they dance to this orchestra versus another orchestra? Or can I see them move and express clearly and simply what they're listening to? Or is it just cicadas and boleos and ganchos all the time? Some people dance like that. You play a Canaro, you play a Di Sarli, you play D'Arienzo, it looks the same. It's all about, like, can I get another cicada in? Can I get another one of those fancy schmancy routines in? To me, it's all fun, it's awesome, but it's just not my cup of tea. I'm a sucker for musicality. I really want to express the music, and I frequently I'm amazed by how I might dance with somebody who has very nice quality of movement, and that actually happened to me at the marathon. I danced with a really nice leader, and I took the embrace, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was so wonderful quality. But then I noticed that he was kind of not really feeling the structure of the music, and there was not enough subtlety in his expression. And so, I kind of decided that was going to be it. I didn't dance with him the rest of the marathon. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to dance with him again, but I definitely kind of put him in this category in my mind of like, okay, that person, he would be really good to dance this orchestra with, and that becomes kind of a way I manage that. So musicality and movement patterns, I really appreciate dancers who are conservative, who don't take a lot of space, who are moving the whole time, they're staying in the line of dance. And the dancers I really enjoy watching are the ones that I have this sense that they're not just dancing with each other, they're dancing with the whole room. They are really sensing the space around them, and they are creating almost this beautiful mosaic, a choreography with everyone else. Their movement is, as I said, conservative, but more than that, it's like there's an elegance to it that I appreciate. And honestly, it doesn't even have to be very advanced vocabulary. Like, I typically don't care if it's just 3 moves over and over. It's the how. And recently, actually, when I see dancers do less, they catch my eye a lot more, because we've been on this wave in tango for quite some time that more is better, more vocabulary, more. And it's produced this sense in the social scene pretty much everywhere, that it's like that we want to see more. We want to see more variety of movements. And that's okay. But for me, what I look for when I go to the dance floor, when I go to the milonga, is I pay particular attention for those dancers who are not moving according to the, rules of more, that they're moving according to their own space, their own listening to the music. I really appreciate when I see dancers in the zone, and when I can really tune into what they're doing. And I frequently will make my choices based on that. And so those are like my top 5, the posture, the movement mechanics. And, I was going to mention this one tidbit, that I was at the milonga, one of the milongas at the marathon, and I was considering this beautiful woman follower dancer, and I was thinking about dancing with her, and I just kind of watched her for a split second, and I saw her do one forward step. She was just making this one forward step with her left foot around the partner, and the way she made that step, how her body moved, in that moment I knew I wanted to dance with her. It was so immediate. So I guess I wanted to share that, because with time, as you watch for these particular things, it becomes so quick that you realize that somebody is a good match for you or not. And I ended up asking her to dance, and it was one of the best tandas of the whole weekend, and I was so excited to connect with her. And she had excellent mechanics, excellent embrace, and it was and she wasn't the kind of dancer that stood out because she was extremely young and extremely audacious and striking, and she was wearing something very hot, and like there was nothing superficial. It was really about her presence in one step. And so when you see that, I think it's very subconscious, unconscious. It's like a reaction. It's an impulse, a reflex, where you see that and you're like, yes, that's it. I want to experience this, whatever this person has to offer. So we had the embrace quality, movement patterns, and musicality. I did have a couple of other ones that serve as sort of like the last, couple of criteria that I might consider, but they're not really at the top. And that is the physicality, how they are physically, and what they're wearing. Okay. Those things don't really play out too much in my mind. However, for example, I know that I have a hard time dancing with short people, as a follower, I should say. So that plays into my decision sometimes. I also don't like to dance with very tall people who are much taller than me, especially since I don't wear heels. So if somebody, there is a dancer who's a fantastic dancer in on the West Coast, who's just too tall for me. And even though I think he's great, I don't really like dancing with him because it's a bit of a strain for me to reach out that high. And then, what they're wearing is kind of the most superficial one. I know that this plays out for some people in a lot more visceral way. I know for men, it does make a difference. When I was growing up tango back in my early days, I was told that if I wanted to get more dances, I just need to wear shorter skirts. And that was given to me more than once. So I know that that's something that plays a part. And I know it plays a part for me in terms of getting my attention, getting me to look at someone. But it doesn't really rank that high when I make my decisions. But I thought I'd throw that in as well, because I guess the opposite can be true too, is if I see somebody and, you know, they're wearing something that's unattractive, maybe I kind of, I guess that has happened before, where like I'm all dressed up and I'm, you know, wearing my makeup and my whatever outfit, and then somebody's like wearing a t-shirt and jeans or something, then it's like, you know, that might impact me in my decision making. But honestly, if I see them as being a good dancer, which frequently that happens, right? Really good dancers, they're like, oh, I'm good anyway, it doesn't matter what I wear. So they'll just, you know, they'll go to milonga wearing jeans and a polo shirt or something, and they'll still be dancing the whole night. And, you know, yeah, I'll make that decision, I guess, on a one-by-one basis. So anyway, so those are some of my tidbits, how to choose a good dancer, what I do. Please don't interpret this as a rule for everyone. These are just ways for you to get in touch with your own preferences, because one of the reasons I like to talk so openly about these things is just to let you know that everybody's thinking about these things, and to normalize there's nothing wrong. And I think ultimately I would like to create or contribute to creating sort of a literacy, a body mechanics literacy. Oof, I just came up with that. To be able to look at someone's movement and be able to tell how they move, you know. And I think that's just something I fantasize about at some point, because one of the biggest obstacles to learning is the fact that we just don't know. A lot of people don't know. They don't know that they don't know. They don't know that they're moving a certain way. They don't know whether another person's movement is good or bad. You know, sometimes I hear a person look at another dancer and go, oh my God, she's got such beautiful lines. She dances so well. And they're aspiring to dance like that. And I look at it and I'm like, wow, that person's so stiff, and they're dancing on their toes and there's so much tension. But, you know, it's kind of like we have to learn to see those things. We have to learn to see them in ourselves and in others. That's why I'm such a huge proponent of making videos of yourselves when you dance. And I know most of you cringe at the idea. Oh my God, you just hate watching yourself dance. But I tell you, man, one of the best tools is to watch yourself dance, because it's right there. It's all right there, you know? You can't hide from it. Okay, obviously I'm on a roll. I'm going to wrap it up on this episode before I go over too long. I would love to hear your comments, your ideas, and hope to see some of you in Portland next week. And you have a great rest of your week. Ciao.